Being a courier for a law agency is usually a straightforward job. Deliver confidential documents, packages, or other papers in a confidential and direct way without violating confidentiality. A service straightforward enough that there are companies that make their money doing it. When you work for Jade, Rakuel, and Themis, however, sometimes a courier has to bring the package into the Sunless Lands, or with greater difficulty, bring back a document from the Sunless Lands. So, how does JRT bring messages to and from the Sunless Lands? Do they really kill their courier every time they need to send a message to the Sunless Lands? And do they really have to perform a miraculous resurrection every time they receive a message? The answer to both questions is a resounding yes. JRT isn't spending their time executing their messengers before doing demonic chants to bring them back from the dead, however. What they do with their Twilight messengers, in a careful and medically controlled environment, is slowly induce hypothermia in their messengers while they carry their messages to the Sunless Lands for those who need them for judgment. When the temperature is cold enough, their hearts are stopped and the messengers have 2 to 3 minutes to carry their messages they carry into the Sunless Lands and collect any messages they can from the accused. When that is done, their bodies are gradually warmed up and their hearts are restarted. Once they are back to health, they are given some time to recover before being sent back in. Being on retainer as a Twilight Messenger pays well, but your health needs to be precise. If anything goes wrong, a Twilight Messenger may not survive coming back from the Sunless Lands. And that is before the trials that the Twilight Messengers suffer, like everyone else, traveling into the Sunless Lands. It takes the right mixture of flexibility and rigidity to see the Sunless Lands and to be able to return sane in the Soulful Lands. It takes a brave or foolish soul to face whatever trials exist between the Soulful and Sunless Lands to get the message to judgment. Some see a light at the end of the tunnel. Some see a river with a ferryman. Others see a bridge of trials. And others still see a labyrinth separating life and death. One of the hardest parts is that time dilates while in the afterlife. People can find themselves wandering for hours, months, years, or even centuries in those 2 minutes their hearts are stopped. JRT is careful to make sure they don't choose messengers who spend too long over in the Sunless Lands. Sure, it may seem harmless to spend 200 years in the afterlife if you only were gone for 2 minutes, until you realize that the messenger is now socialized for a life among the dead, not the living, not anymore. They may forget their own names while in the Sunless Lands, and if they do lose their sanity or their names, well, JRT does pay very well for the best long-term care facilities for their employees. This story I collected is one of the last messages from a Twilight Messenger who carried their last message into the Sunless Lands. They lost their life and their name to carry that last message, and their story was scrawled on yellowed notebook paper gripped in their hands when their heart beat for the very last time. I don't remember who I was before I came into this hospital. I know that I was a courier, a Twilight Messenger for JRT, but I don't remember who I was before this job. Was I married? Was I single? Was I something else entirely? Did I have any living family? Or were they all dead? Did I graduate college? Or was I a dropout? What was my name? I hear the doctors refer to me just as the patient. I know I had a job. I remember the job. And that is the only clear thing I remember. And if I could do the job all over again, I would have started writing the day I came into the hospital. I remember the cold freezing in my veins. I remember my heart slowing. I remember my thoughts clouding as my vision faded, and as I descended into the darkness, it felt like I was sinking into the gurney I was laying on. I sank and sank and sank into the darkness. I was tied to the gurney with the briefcase in my tight arms, as I kept it descending into the darkness. As I fell and fell, it was like falling asleep, the feeling of torpor and fading. But unlike sleep, it didn't stop. Not until the light appeared in the darkness. A light so weak at first, I think it's imaginary, but it focuses above me, and soon other details resolve into my sight. I can see buzzing lights above my face. I am now in a hospital bed rather than a gurney, and I am no longer tied down. The room is cleaner than any hospital room I've seen. The sheets are comfortable, and next to my bed is a steak, dinner, and a glass of wine. I can hear the sizzle on the steak. I can smell how delicious it is, and my stomach grumbles like I've never eaten anything in my entire life. We have to fast for 24 hours leading up to the delivery to avoid aspirating into our lungs. Even if you can tolerate the hunger, you still feel it. I turn from the food and I force myself to stand. I am lightheaded for a moment, but that fades, and I continue my trek into the hospital. The hospital is quiet and, for the most part, empty. I can see room after room. Most rooms have their curtains drawn, and the few I can see without curtains drawn have patients inside. Patients who feast on their meals given to them. A few are visited by the nurses and doctors. Those I try not to linger too long on. As far as I can see, we arrive with our wounds, and the doctors and nurses have to put the bodies back together. People have died in many horrific ways, and even though we're already dead here and cannot be harmed further, it is haunting to see someone get their severed limbs reattached, or see someone burned to a practical crisp, covered in healing gauze, so that they could regrow their skin. Still, I knew it wasn't my place to linger too long here. I had documents to deliver to judgment. Fortunately, there is a nurse's desk where I can ask where the judgment is kept. The nurse is dressed in pink scrubs with a pink surgical mask that covers her lower face, and over their eyes are dark sunglasses that look out of place on the rest of their face. When I ask to be pointed to where judgment is being made, they point to a door. I think it wasn't there to begin with. As I walked into the operating theater, there I could see where the judgment took place. Just like the rest of the sunless lands, not everyone saw the same thing. What I saw was a massive operating theater where, in the seats above, 42 doctors watched the surgery down below, where one doctor, Anubis, actually works on the patient. Anubis is dressed in a black surgeon gown, and over his face is protected by a carved wooden mask, carefully carved to resemble the face of a jackal, that is painted as black as obsidian. Sometimes, though, if you stare too long at Anubis, he changes. Sometimes he isn't a surgeon. He is an ancient mortician removing the organs, and his mask isn't a mask. It's a face. I try not to focus too long on that. It feels like Anubis measures my organs when he looks at me. The patient, who is fully awake and aware, pain-free, is cut open, and each organ is removed carefully and weighed on a scale next to a glowing feather. After each organ is weighed, the 42 assessors record what they see, and Anubis carefully places the organ into a nearby jar. While Anubis works, something in the darkness scrambles around, snapping, hoping for a snack. But Anubis is careful not to feed it. Not until the last organ, at least. The final organ weighed is the heart. When the heart is weighed, there is a final judgment, where the 42 doctors declare what they have learned, down to the operating theater below. It isn't Anubis who makes the final judgment, though. It is Anubis's mentor and ruler, Osiris. Sitting in a wheelchair, his legs bound together by gauze, but his crotch is still red with blood seeping through. His white surgical mask cannot quite cover his beard, and even in this form he has 2 crowns on his head. Like Anubis, if you stare at Osiris for too long, you can view what is beneath his glamour as well. You will see an undead king with blue dead skin. His legs are skeletal, and his penis torn away, still bleeding into the gauze, even as he changes it. What doesn't change is his crowns. Both crowns with eyes and snakes that stare and hiss whenever you get close. Osiris will rarely speak while Anubis works, but when Anubis weighs the heart of the patient, all are silent while Osiris makes his judgment. He takes all of the words of his 42 assessors. He listens to any words by Anubis. He even gives his accused a chance to speak to their own defense. But when his judgment is made, he makes one of 3 choices. If your heart is in balance with the feather, then Osiris's choice is the choice that most hopes he makes, to return their heart so they can move on to Eru, the field of reeds, to the Comedian paradise, a place not too dissimilar to the life on Earth, but one where they can live happily. They still have to face 21 gates, 21 challenges, and 21 demons to reach Eru, but there they can hunt, they can farm, they can walk among their gods, and that is enough to be paradise to many, especially considering some of the domains of the sunless lands. Some souls, though, are too heavy with evil, too burdened with guilt, too full of blood and bile and hate. And Osiris only makes one choice. He does nothing, and he lets the heart fall into the hungry jaws of the beast that haunts the shadows. Amut. You may see a flash of jaws as Amut consumes the heart, the dead soul, and there is nothing left of the dead. Even the removed organs of the body simply fade into shadow. Annihilation awaits the wicked who come across Osiris's scale. However, those whose heart is not perfectly balanced, but also not so evil that it falls into Amut's jaws, they are instead given a job by Osiris, a role in these hospital halls to help prepare more of the dead for the sunless lands beyond. The Duat and Aru is vast, and Osiris needs a lot of helpers, some of whom may perform tasks for him in the soulful lands, others in the Duat, others in the halls of the hospital, others still may even work in Aru, but they work for Osiris. For a time. The heavier the heart, the longer their time, and their role in the Duat is identical to their role in life. So doctors work as doctors, janitors work as janitors, lawyers as lawyers, farmers as farmers, prostitutes as prostitutes, artists as artists, and so on. It feels like it's more of a continuation of the life you lived before, rather than a new life. It can feel soul-crushing and even hopeless at times. But at least Osiris's promise of working towards a better existence will be fulfilled. And surely chores is better than annihilation. And this is where my job for JRT comes in. Sometimes there is evidence from the soulful lands that is needed for the assessors or for Osiris. I'm not exactly sure how the request arrives in my office. Messenger pigeon, words on smoke, iris scroll, email, phone call, or something else entirely. But I do know that Osiris likes his evidence delivered to his hands only. The patient is cut open. Osiris waves me over as he looks at Anubis, weighing the patient's organs. I am not medically trained, but more than a few of the patient's organs look like tapeworms, isopods, and other parasites, as Anubis pulled and cut the organs of the patient out. As I hand Osiris the briefcase, he opens the form and he reads over the form. As he reads out loud. People of the ancient and medieval days, even when they could read, usually read out loud. Osiris is old-fashioned in that way. The accused has a sin on their record of adultery, a sin that is important enough to be recorded 3 times by the assessors. He claims that his divorce with his wife went into effect by the time he had slept with someone else. We have requested from the soulful lands proof of divorce and when the divorce has went into effect. We have proven that intercourse occurred at 2 a.m., the 6th of January, 2739, in the Empire of the Seven Cities. The divorce goes into effect as of midnight, the 6th of January, 2739. Even though his ex-wife was living in the Republic of Sunset at the time, and it was 11 p.m., 5th of January, 2739. The accused's divorce went into effect. So it is the belief of the assessors, Querti, Penemu, and Sertiu, and Osiris, that the accused was not married at the time of intercourse, so he did not willingly commit the sin of adultery. However, it is still the position of Canemti that the accused still caused tears with his actions. How do you plead in that regard? Osiris asked the patient who looked up at him. Anubis elbow deep in his body, now pulling out snakes from the man's body. I did make her cry that night, yes, but she made me cry many more nights. I made her cry once. Surely that isn't as bad as adultery, he asked, and Osiris only read over the document. The question wasn't, was adultery as bad as making someone cry? It was, did you make her cry? Now, with that clarification, let us weigh your heart, Osiris said, as Anubis made one final cut, and the heart was removed, placed on the scale next to the feather of truth, while the entire court watched, as even with the sin of tears weighing down his heart was lighter than the feather. It is the finding of Osiris, god of the Duat, god of Eru, god of judgment, god of the halls of order, the king with 2 crowns, that you have done more good than bad in your life. Even though you caused your ex-wife to cry, you saved your life and the lives of your children by leaving. You may move on to your challenges to reach Eru. Now, take your heart with you, Osiris said as he removed the heart and placed it back in his chest. Anubis now sewing up the open cuts and empty cavity before he would wrap him in gauze to allow him to move on. Osiris turned to face me as he spoke. When you are ready, head back to your room and consume your food. One of my people will find you soon enough. Oh, thank you, Osiris. But I am not staying long. I am just here to give you the message, I told him as he looked me over, and his two crowns looked me over as well. If you say so, but all enter my domain eventually. Today, tomorrow, a century from now. When you are ready, head back to your room and consume your food. One of my people will find you soon enough, Osiris said, turning from me as I wandered through the hospital. Normally, when I finish delivering the message, I am brought back to the soulful lands immediately. This time, however, I had time to start to wander the halls. Through the halls, it felt like there were two different layers to the world. Sterile white halls overlaid old mud brick. Fluorescent lights were overlaid by sputtering torches and candles. One of the strangest things about the sunless lands is that the natural and the paranatural simply existed together. All together. One veiling the other, and other times what we see as natural or paranatural is just what we can understand. One of the few things that JRT clarified about the sunless lands was it wasn't just one afterlife. It was many afterlives. What people believed, what people understood, how they died, and even where they died affected where they went in the sunless lands. And even if people went to the same afterlife, they could view things very differently. Still, though, there was recurring ideas, places, and challenges. The Bridge of Trials, the Mausoleum, Judgment, all for example. Still, it was eerie to wander down the halls. They were quiet, and for the most part, empty. But the place didn't feel empty. The closest example I could explain was it was like being on an old battlefield. Even when you were alone, you didn't feel alone. Even when it was quiet, you felt compelled to remain quiet because you could feel the shadow of death following you. But in this hospital, everywhere you went was in death's shadow. In one of the crossroads of the hospital, where there was halls in front of me, to the left and right of me, behind me, and a staircase leading both up and down. Peeking up the stairs, I could see more of the same hospital halls as my veins began to burn. Normally, random pain in my veins is a bad sign, but here in the sunless lands, that could only mean one thing though. They restarted my heart, and I was leaving. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Normally, when my veins ignited, I felt lighter and lighter as I drifted off to sleep, only to wake up in the soulful lands again. But I didn't feel lighter. I felt heavier and heavier, like there was chains trying to pull me down, and my veins were getting hotter and hotter. The candle wax was being dripped into them. I took desperate gasps like I was trying to breathe as I slammed my body against the wall. I don't know why I did, but it felt like the right thing to do. As I slammed myself against the wall, I could see nurses and doctors running to meet me. In their hands were both stethoscopes, scalpels, and other tools that could be used for medicine or could be used for torture. I gasped on the ground, staring up at the fluorescent lights as my clothes were cut, and I could hear the doctors and nurses speak. This one's body is not all the way dead. It's getting there. I think their heart finally gave out. one of the doctors said as the shears cut off my chest. My bare chest was exposed to the cold air of the hospital. As I felt the scalpel bite into my flesh, as the nurses brightened, as the doctors around me blurred and shifted into familiar doctors and nurses, those of the soulful ones. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. There was a tube in my mouth and down my throat, pumping air both into and out of my lungs, feeling a little dry in my lungs. I tried to raise my hands to let them know that I was aware of them, but my body felt like it was made out of lead, while the nurses and doctors rushed around me. Why were they so concerned? I wondered. But then I realized that my flesh wouldn't just cut open in the sunless lands. My chest was open while a doctor reached into the cavity, massaging my heart with his hands. Keeping my heart pumping, I caught a few words before I started to fade out again. Cardiac arrest. Won't beat. Cardiac massage. Blood flowing. We need now. If judgment, we cannot. A nurse shone a light into my eyes as she tried to give me advice. If you can hear me, resist. If you are, cannot save you. Ambulance will be minutes. We will your heart by open cardiac, but we need you in the sunless well. Your time is, he said, as I faded back into the darkness. But it wasn't a gentle fall. It was sudden, and I woke up in the sunless lands. I woke up in my room with my chest open, my heart occasionally beating in my open chest. Each beat was painful, like something was squeezing around my heart. And when I could feel the beat, the world around me felt a little unreal, like I was dissociating, and for a brief moment I could see the faces and lights of the soulful lands. But they kept fading. But I remembered the nurse's words. Most of her words weren't hopeful to me, but there was one word: resist. That I could do here. First, I would have to avoid the food in the sunless lands, I thought to myself as I saw the steak dinner. It looked even more appetizing now, as I realized I hadn't eaten since yesterday, at least. So I threw the steak into the trash can as I wrapped my sheets around my open chest cavity. Now my organs kept inside, I moved to the opening in my door. Thankfully, it didn't hurt, except when my heart beat. There was no door, but there was a curtain as I closed the curtain to hopefully keep the nurses and doctors from noticing me. I would have done more, but I felt so tired at the time, so hungry, so weak. Not too long ago, I was strong enough to see Osiris and Anubis. Now I was exhausted, just closing my curtains. Still, I knew all I had to do was resist the food, but not let the doctors and nurses take me away to Anubis. He was a busy god. Thousands of people die every day, and a sizable percentage of them flowed towards the Duat and Eru. So, as long as I didn't draw attention to myself, I would be fine. I hope, at least. Still, I was so tired, I began to trek back to my bed. Every step I felt weaker, the pain in my chest grew worse. My heart hurt like I ran a marathon unprepared, but it was beating only once every few seconds now. As I stepped towards my bed, I realized that my sheet fell off. My intestines trailed behind me, pulsing, squeezing, and relaxing, like my entrails were a hungry snake. I giggled at this sight. It's really strange seeing your organs trailing behind you like a bridal train. I even lifted my hand up to my head, and I could feel blood falling from the back of my head. I could feel my bone at the edges of the wound, and I could feel something soft and squishy in the back of my head, just beneath the wound. I think I knew its name once, but it now leaked out alongside my blood, gray mixing alongside red as I fell forward, not quite reaching the bed. It was so tiring as my eyes closed and I could see the bright light of the surgical lights again. My eyes felt dry, my ears were ringing, I could feel pain in my skull, along with something wet and warm falling out of the back of it. The doctors and nurses looked even more upset. One had a large power drill with both blood and gray matter on the bit. One doctor was yelling at the doctor with the drill. You drilled too deep. Relieve the pressure. Extent of the damage. The brain leaking. Floor. And they... Poison? Who tried to kill them? Do we... Antidotes? Multiple organ failure. Heart, liver, lungs, nerves. If... But we stop the poison or we... Their heart with a straw. I heard before a different doctor shone a light in my eyes. It was strange that the light she shone was from a torch she carried in her right hand. Torch that produced no flames. She wore no mask, no gloves, and no gown. But she did reach into my chest, where the other doctor was squeezing my heart. She focused on me, and she spoke clearly. Let go. Fight the dying light all you want. The light still dies. Let go and move on. They can't save you. I made sure of it. I felt another tight squeeze around my heart as the doctor pulled something out of my chest. It was bloody and it had weird bones like strings in his fingers, while the other doctors screamed when they saw what was in his hands. You could only cheat me so many times before I stopped letting you play. Find a new game to play, Vanth told me. I don't know how I knew her name, but I knew her name, just like I knew she took mine, along with the bloody mess from my chest that used to be my heart. As I fell back into the darkness, and when I woke back up into the sunless lands, I lay on the bed, my chest wrapped in bandages, while the nurses and doctors buzzed around me, offering me food and drink that I took eagerly, ravenously swallowing down the steak while my head was wrapped up by a doctor with a black jackal mask. As I get wrapped up, the bandages feel so heavy, but there is no more pain. There are holes in my memory. My name gone, most of my past gone, just the day I entered JRT, and the fact that I was in these hospital halls, still free of pain as I finish my meal. My bed is pushed by the doctor and the jackal mask into the operating theater. Once in the operating room, I can see the 42 assessors. They're all smiling. They have no mouths, but they smile down at me. Osiris does not smile, but his crowns slither and stare at me as the snakes slowly slide up to bind my legs down. The doctor in the jackal mask grabs a scalpel as he approaches my chest, and mere centimeters from my chest, I raise a hand and Anubis stops his incision just before he began. Can you give me a paper and pen to write on it? I want to give one final message to the world before, told him as Anubis tilted his head, his mask confused as he turned to his master Osiris. That is your right, as the messenger of Jade, Rakuel, and Themis. "Who do you want to deliver your message to?" Osiris asked me as a nurse brought over a clipboard with notebook paper and a pen. "I don't remember my life before. I just know that I have a right to send a message back. So please grant me the chance to write this message and a final heartbeat to return this note," I asked the king of the dead. Osiris nodded, and I began to write my story. I don't know who I am writing this story to. Logically, I should have someone who cared about me. A spouse, a family member, a child, friend, maybe a student I mentored. I don't know the life I lived. I don't remember my choices. I don't remember my circumstances. I don't remember who I was. But I will soon be judged for those choices. I may live in the paradise of Eru, or I may wander the Dua until I find my place in the sunless lands. Or maybe I was truly so evil that my heart will be Amut's meal. But even the most evil, vile villains had someone who loved them, someone who cared about them. I know my body is having surgery done on it, so if I have an emergency contact, or a family member, or other point of contact, then my body will be where they go. This note will appear with my body, and I ask whoever finds this note to bring it to my loved one who came to visit me. And to my dear reader, I am so sorry that I forgot you. I hope you know that even though I don't remember you, I loved you, I cared about you, and I hope that even with all of my mistakes and imperfections, that I made your life better just by being in it. I know with certainty that my life was better with you in it. Thank you. Signed by The Forgotten. This note appeared in the hands of the deceased right at the time of death was called. It was brought to me because the deceased had no one who would want to take the note. The deceased, Alex Ptolemy Magus, had no living relatives at the time of their death. No family, no siblings, no children, no friends, no partners, not even a family pet or plant back at their home. According to their colleagues, Alex was a loner who just did their job for long hours, only going home to recover from their trips to the sunless lands. No one could remember much of Alex's life. He never reached out to anyone, and no one tried to reach out to Alex. A quick search into their life indicated that anyone who was close to Alex, either as family or a friend, would die in strange accidents, starting with their mother suffocating on nitrous oxide while giving birth, and the last death found was Alex's brother, Einup, who died just the week before. Einup was a traveling salesman who recently went through a divorce with his wife. Having the divorce approved and finalized mere hours before he was found dead in a Seven Cities hotel room, killed by numerous parasites in his body, which caused multiple organ failure. The woman he was with is believed to be pregnant, but she wants nothing to do with Alex or Enup's family.